The following program is made possible by Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
There may be no more controversial item on the March 3rd ballot than the election in Foster City to recall City Councilman Herb Perez. He's here. The game is recall politics. The game is on. I'm Mark Simon. Welcome to the game. My partner Kevin Mullin is on assignment. Herb Perez was elected to the Foster City Council in 2011 and re-elected in 2015. He is termed out at the end of the year. Nonetheless, a group of residents launched a successful petition drive to recall him. Foster City voters will vote yes or no on March 3rd on whether he should be forced out of office and then decide between two candidates, Patrick Sullivan and Jon Froomin. Welcome, Herb. Thank you for being here. I know we were eager to have you. We did a show without you, and it's nice that we have a chance to get the other side of the story. Why do you think they're recalling you?
I'm not really sure. I think politics are always divisive. I've met with residents, been elected, tried to run actually 3 times. The first time unsuccessfully, lost to a very qualified candidate, Charlie Bernitsky, who ended up serving. We served together and did a lot of great work together. And then was reelected twice. And as I knocked on those doors, in addition to campaigning for a couple of other council members and most importantly the bond measure, when you talk to our residents, their main concerns are quality of life, police, fire and safety, and fiscal responsibility. And so those are the things that I think the council has done a really good job of accomplishment. We have started with $11 million and a $3.5 million deficit under Pam Frisella, Kolig, and Kiesel. And now fast forward to the end of my term, and we're at $98 million in reserves and a annual budget surplus of $7 million.
So that's why you think maybe you shouldn't be recalled. But the issue they're raising, there's a couple of main issues.
Right.
One is basically that you're rude to people you disagree with. You call people liars. You call them miscreants, is everybody's favorite word to toss around.
Yeah.
At city council meetings, when they're talking under public comment, you've been known to turn your chair away. You've been known to leave the room if it was somebody who you regard as a political opponent. And there's people will say there's a lack of decorum. There's a lack of respect that you're showing, that you're not civil or respectful. What's your response to that?
I come from a performance culture, and so the good news about a performance culture, whether it's in the Olympic movement, the board of directors, it's a performance culture. So we measure our success on how many people we put on a podium, and more importantly, on how we do our job and what our outcomes are. So I always try to go back to our performance and our culture. With regard to meeting with residents and talking to them about their concerns, I can tell you one thing is for certain, that there is no one that is part of the recall movement that has ever met with me privately or publicly. Mm-hmm. Not one that I can. Now I can tell you about the hundreds of residents that I've met over the years that have expressed their concerns to me.
Have they expressed concerns about your behavior at these council meetings?
I'll go to a.
You don't deny that you've been doing these things,
I'll
right?
talk to you about. I think that's an important concept. So I had a great mentor who was on the council, Rick Wyckoff, for example. And so if Rick thought that I was being too acerbic on a particular issue, he would call me up and say, Herb, you should think about maybe approaching it that. And in fact, you have on times. You've said to me I could do a better job of listening and not responding. So to be clear, there are things that I have never done that people have said I have done. I have never, not once ever, said to someone standing in front of a podium any of the words that they said. In general dialogue, when we're talking about the bond issue, for example, that was passed by 80% of the voters, I said, it's important to get the information from qualified sources. There's no shortage of ultra-crepidarians and people that would mislead.
I'm sorry, what's that word?
Ultra-crepidarians. An ultra-crepidarian is an individual who speaks with authority on something of which they have no knowledge.
It sounds like one of those words on a word of the day calendar.
I actually learned the word during an Olympic meeting, and I want to say I learned it from
Okay.
George Steinbrenner.
So here's the thing. Well, there's a hell of a student for public decorum.
There you go.
So here's the thing. Yeah, maybe someone isn't at the podium and you call them a liar. But shortly after they get up and say something, you refer to liars, you refer to miscreants. The fact is you have termed people at city council meetings liars, have you not?
No. And so let's go back to that particular. So what's been interesting is the creative use of video editing. So, for example, there's a video of a particular individual running for a commission spot. She was treated politely with decorum. She was asked questions she couldn't answer. She was obviously underqualified or not qualified for the position. We chose someone else. In that same meeting, there were comments made by every council member about the need for people to be prepared, the need for people to come prepared, the need for people to be students of it. Out of 6 applicants, 5 came prepared. We give them the questions in advance. We gave them the answers in advance 2 months. One individual came and was unprepared and unprofessional. And so at that point, every councilman made a comment about being prepared and being whatever. I think that you have an obligation to protect the public from misinformation. So the instance that you may be talking about is when we were doing the levy bond. We had an individual in our community that would be provided with facts, and he didn't like the facts because he wanted to save the city's money from being used for housing, for example. We'd explained to him that the city doesn't buy housing. Developers build and buy housing. But he would go out and talk to the public and misel the public and create a lot of extra work and misinformation in the community. So you come to the fundamental question, which is, do the electeds have a responsibility, which I believe they do, to let the public know that there's misinformation out there. And in fact, they may be lies. And I think we do.
But there's a difference between saying somebody is stating misinformation and just calling them a liar. There's a difference in the weight of those words, isn't there? Look, the fact is, you and I have talked about this privately at our mutual request, and we've talked before about whether or not your conduct in public went too far in terms of lack of civility. That there's one thing to say, I don't agree with somebody. It's one thing to say, I think he's wrong. It's another thing to turn your back on somebody, to walk out when you don't want to hear what they have to, you don't like them necessarily, or to simply say that they're lying.
Yeah, so I don't think that I've ever turned my back on someone speaking. I've talked to attorneys during people's, if the attorney's next was to speak to someone. And the only time that I've left a council meeting, which people have misinterpreted, I had a stomach issue. Now, I guess I could have stood up and said, oh, I'm sorry, I have an issue that's going to cause me great embarrassment if I continue to sit in my chair, or I could simply just get up and go to the bathroom. So I chose to get up and go to the bathroom.
The fact is that one of the main arguments for the pro-recall side is your conduct in public.
Right.
Do you have any regrets about your conduct in public? Do you wish you'd done things a little differently, taken a different approach, or are you very comfortable with what you've done and how you've spent?
No, I think everybody, in retrospect, can look at different things they could have done and could have done differently. And so I'm sure that if I were to look in a very hard lens at over the course of 9 years, are there things I could have done better? I mean, there are things that I wish I could have said differently, done better. Absolutely, And then there were things that absolutely need to be said, and in fact were said in a very harsher sense by my colleagues like Sam Hindy when it came to Richa, or when it came to my colleagues like Art Kiesel when it came to Steve Okamoto, or when it came to all of us and Steve Okamoto and his violations of the Brown Act. Okay. So those were things that we had to say loudly and publicly, right. And I think those are important.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with Councilman Herb Perez, target of a recall in Foster City. Stick around.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. We're joined today by Councilman Herb Perez of Foster City, who is the object of a recall election on March 3rd. We're spending a lot of time talking about your personal conduct and your
Sure.
public conduct because it's one of the central themes of the people trying to recall you. One of the other things that's come up, and they have video on their website and even some ads that they posted on Facebook about people who say, citizens who say that they've had physical confrontations by you, and even a couple of council member colleagues who say they felt bullied and intimidated by you. What's your response to that?
I'm a 5'8" man in a world of 6'5" men. If they feel intimidated by me,
You're a 5'8" man who's got a gold medal in Taekwondo from the Olympics and who teaches martial arts. So it's not like you're unarmed.
You know what's interesting about that conversation for me is I'm 60 years old, and the recall people and the tactics they use, they went through every piece of information they could find about me, and nowhere did you ever find a single piece of information about me assaulting someone.
Well, what you do see, though, are police reports that were filed by people who say they were physically confronted by you and made to feel uncomfortable, that you were loud, that you were physically aggressive. Yeah, you didn't lay your hands on anybody, but that doesn't mean they didn't feel threatened by you.
So I've never seen a single police report that says that I have ever intimidated anyone, nor have the police ever said to me that I've intimidated anyone. Now, whether I stay away from, I travel between City Hall, my businesses, and dropping my kids off at school. I go out of my way to avoid people that are involved with the recall for a reason, because they actively try to antagonize us. They put their people outside the front of a local supermarket where it's directly across from us. So my members of my business, for example, boycotted that supermarket. So it cost that supermarket a significant amount of money because of the recall people that were stationed out front and harassing them on the way in. Me personally, I don't shop at that supermarket. I shop at Whole Foods.
Well, okay. But so you're saying you have never physically confronted anybody or attempted to intimidate?
Nor is there a single valid or validated account of it. So, you tomorrow, Mark, as you know, can go and call the police and say, this is what happened, you did this. Now, the police will file a report. They'll ask you whether you did it. Ask me whether you did it or not, and I'll say no. And that's the extent of it. So I can't stop people from filing false police reports.
But you do have colleagues who were on the council with you, Steve Okamoto and Gary Pollard, who say they felt bullied by you and that you attempted to intimidate them on more than one occasion.
In what fashion? Well, I've never heard that.
You've never heard that? It's on their Facebook page, it's on the video, it's on their webpage.
I have never heard it. I got to be honest with you. I would love to respond to something, but how can I? I'm not on Facebook to see their page. I block most of them from my personal page. So unless if they want to come here and say it to my face, I'll absolutely respond to it.
So when someone disagrees with you and you get heated and you use words like liar or miscreant or whatever multisyllabic word you just used, they should not feel intimidated by you?
I'm not sure that, I guess there's a couple of things. Were you talking about council members?
Sure.
So if you're a council member, as you know, politics is a full contact sport. A board of directors are 5 people, and we've had this conversation before, and those 5 qualified people need to be able to have real conversations about real issues that affect our community. One of the individuals you mentioned cost the city $500,000 because he had a personal agenda with a local sports group, which took him out as a coach or as a member of the board of directors. He came to the council and asked the council to delay the installation of a turf field, which is now installed, and because of his personal favor, it cost us $500,000. Now that individual needed to be held accountable for that $500,000 cost to the city. The other individual you mentioned, on 2 occasions, spoke on behalf of the council and had inappropriate emails with the school district that cost us, let me say it clearly, with Charter Square, the owner of Charter Square, violating the Brown Act, and had to apologize twice publicly, or he was going to be sent to the DA for prosecution. So on those, now that's a contact sport.
What I hear you saying is that you were justified in confronting them over these things, and if they felt intimidated, that's on them.
If words where you hold somebody accountable for their decisions as a council member to council member, if words where you hold them accountable for that, that's intimidation. I don't think that's intimidation, Mark.
Okay, we talked a little bit of one of the other issues, and you're referencing costing the city money. One of the other things they talk about is your advocacy of a $71 million sports complex at Leo Ryan Park.
There's not a document, a public meeting, a record where any of us approved the $71 million. So let me tell you what.
Well, okay, you didn't approve it, but you did advocate for it.
No, what we did approve was there was a ask for either a $54 million center, there was an ask for a $40 million center, or there was an ask for an as-built. So as we went through these scenarios, Jennifer Liu, our much beleaguered Park and Rec director, had put into that pile, out of a $50 million ask for new parks, the portion of parks that would be improved. So you got to understand Leo Ryan Park, you've been to it, named after the esteemed Leo Ryan. There is a rec center here. There was a question as to what to replace that building with. And then Jennifer Liu had envisioned $19 million worth of improvements throughout the park, none of which we approved and none of which were part of a building. When we saw that for the first time at a study session, we were all politely shocked, all of us including. And the direction at that time, which was everyone, the direction was not to proceed. And in fact, the only direction that's been given on that project has been to do a as-built $35 million.
So what your opponents are saying is that, in fact, at the meeting, you advocated for the $71 million master plan. You got upset when it didn't go forward. You offered to resign from the Parks and Recs Committee at the time.
I did resign from the Park and Rec Committee.
Is that because they didn't take into consideration the way you wanted to proceed here?
No, because on 2 occasions before I'd asked not to be on this project, and the reason I had asked not to be on the project is I had been on the Park and Rec Committee for 9 years. I had been on the Park and Rec Committee 6 years prior.
So the people who say that you were upset at the meeting that it didn't go your way, they're just lying.
See, now you're using the word lying.
No, I'm asking you.
I can't speak for what they thought. I can tell you what we all said. So I know we were at the meeting, and all of us that were at the meeting were shocked at what Jennifer Liu had proposed. We then redirected her to go back. I suggested that they put somebody else on the project because I created the subcommittee system, so I don't know if you're aware of that.
Okay, we're coming up on a break.
All right, so it's going to be quick. So as a member of the subcommittee, there are 2 of us. I wanted to exit to give another member who was passionate about the idea time to put their input in it. All of them refused.
Okay.
So when it came time to carry the heavy water, I went back to the bucket.
All right. We're going to take another break. Stick around. We'll be right back.
It's been over 150 years since Wells Fargo first opened for business. Since then, we've enjoyed your community support, and we're passionate about returning it. Every day, Wells Fargo team members roll up their sleeves and donate their time to organizations and charitable groups throughout the Bay Area. Nationally, we've committed even more. In just the past 2 years alone, we've donated over $70 million to support schools and educational programs. It's a commitment we're proud of. Wells Fargo, the next stage.
Welcome back to the game. I'm Mark Simon. We're joined today by Foster City Councilman Herb Perez, who is the subject of a recall election on March 3rd. If, in addition, there's on the ballot Patrick Sullivan and Jon Froomin, who are running to replace him should he be recalled. We're not going to get into everything, and so I want to encourage people. It's not hard to find both yes on recall and no on recall information online. Herb will caution you that some of it's not accurate. His opponents will caution you that some of it's not accurate. And I have a feeling that whoever from the yes on recall side is watching this, Herb is making them crazy. But let's talk a little bit about what is the standard for recall. We've talked a little bit about your public conduct. You've tried to explain that. We've talked a little bit about money. There's, of course, the continuing allegation that the city, you owe the city $17,000 for sponsorships that you haven't paid over several years, and that's one of their examples in their flyer about how you don't fulfill your obligations. The other one is that you're later a no-show to a good number of city council meetings, especially since about 2018, and especially regional and regional boards and commissions.
Which one you want me to address?
Well, let's do with the attendance thing later.
The attendance is easy. I have now a 98% attendance rate.
But they would say that's over the 9 years you've been in office. In the last 2 years in particular, your attendance has dropped off dramatically.
No, my attendance, it's no way it could. So in order to have a 98% attendance rating, you would have to miss less than a meeting or 2 meetings a year. I had a 5-year perfect attendance record. Perfect, not missed meeting. I had the best attendance of any.
5 years in your first term?
5 years over, I would say first or second term. So I have a 2% attendance rating. One was for a medical issue where I was hospitalized for a week, which is none of their business, to be honest. The second was when I was being selected as the ethics chair for the Association of National Olympic Committees, and I had to fly to Japan prior to the Olympics to be seated as the only ethics commissioner for 45 countries here representing us and the 45 Pan-American regions. Those are the only time. Any other time that I could not attend a council meeting, I either got the packet, even when I was in the hospital, and read it. So that's just inaccurate.
What about boards and commissions? They're citing in particular the Airport Roundtable and the City-County Association of Governments. Yeah. And they do show official records that show you were later tardy for a good number of those meetings.
No. Well, the City-County one, there was a person that was wanting to be mayor who wanted to attend those meetings and asked me.
Deferred to him.
I deferred to him because I deferred to him. Let me just say I deferred to him. So in the cases where I thought it would be better for the individual request, I defer to them.
Quickly, what about the $17,000 that you owe the city that you haven't paid?
I don't owe the city $17,000. The city owes us $37,000. We filed an 800 claim, which quite frankly is no one's business. The city can disclose that if they want. We are disappointed by the lack of response by our city manager and our park and rec director. We have no signed agreements or any benefits that would validate the $17,000. What we do have is Jon Froomin sitting in a city beer booth with recall T-shirts, collecting signatures using city resources. We paid $5,000 for the right to attend that and have asked to be recompensated for the illegal use and the diminishment to our brand. We're going to give the city an opportunity to make us whole. And we filed the appropriate claims as suggested by the legal.
It sounds like one of the things you're saying is that in this dispute over you, nobody has unclean hands. That if they're going to accuse you of something, it's just as easy to accuse them of similar behavior.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, there's no real question. Is that what you're saying? It's like, you know, we talked to you about $17,000, and the next thing I know, I'm hearing about some other guy who misused.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that, Mark. What I'm saying is this. You asked me a question about the sponsorship. The fact is that Gold Medal has spent, not Herb Perez, not the council member, $80,000 in cash donations to the city. It has spent another $400,000 in donations to the community. So almost close to $500,000 of cash, not VIK. It's unfortunate that value of that sponsorship to our community every year would be diminished by the misinformation of the park and rec director, and more importantly, the lack of responsibility on behalf of the city manager for his direct reports. I'm in a difficult position to speak about it because all we did was when we would get a bill, we would pay it. We talked to our former city manager, Kevin Miller, and one of the allegations was that there was money owed from 2012. Now, as you know, Kevin Miller was our director, and Kevin then called the attorney and said, Herb Perez or Gold Medal or anyone does not owe any money, and in fact there's no way they could have owed money because I collected everything from 2016 and back. More importantly, Ed Suwan, our financial director, was asked that question publicly. And every year there has been a clean audit up until 2020.
Okay. In your ballot statement, candidate statement,
I wrote that a long time ago.
Well, then it's good to refresh your memory.
Hopefully it's good.
I said, I respect democracy. It is unfortunate that individuals behind the recall do not. They would circumvent the will of 8 years of voters who have consistently supported and voted me into office. And that's unfortunate. They cannot name a single wrongdoing, no illegal taking of money, nothing. They just don't like me, and I'm okay with that.
That's in the ballot statement?
Yeah.
Written as in the ballot statement?
Yeah. Well, it's the candidate statement that's on the website at the Foster City. We've only got a minute left. What's wrong with somebody recalling somebody because they don't like them? They don't like the way they behave.
That's what elections are for. So I want to state this clearly because there's only a minute left. We have a council member sitting who violated the Brown Act illegally for self-taking, for self-promotion, for his own personal agenda. And our council, not me, 2 members of our council, including an individual, refused to censure him.
Let's talk about you and the recall.
On me, I have not done anything similar to that. I haven't done any illegal act. I've built the city to a $96 million surplus. I've done my job as a public servant and protected the public. So the question becomes, should someone be allowed to circumvent the election? That's what elections are for, unless you have an illegal act.
And your answer to that question is?
Which one?
You just asked the question, should someone be allowed to circumvent the will of the voters? Isn't that what recall's for?
Well, you would say that that's what it's for, and I don't believe that's what it's for, nor does many esteemed council members, including Rick Wyckoff, Charlie Berninsky, and our former city manager, Kevin Miller, just to name a few. So when I look at the side of the fence that I sit on the side with guys like Rick Wyckoff, Kevin Miller, Charlie Berninsky, and the people in our community, or I could sit on the other side of the fence. I've seen the tactics of the other side of the fence, which include lying, misrepresentation, and misrepresenting facts. I'm going to be okay on my side of the fence. And in closing, if it's the will of the voters, if misinformation wins the day, I'll be okay with that. I can leave holding my head high, knowing that we did our job well, we did it responsibly, but more importantly, we did it with dignity and ethics.
I think that's as good a place as any to stop. Herb Perez, thanks for joining us on this discussion.
Always a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you for joining us, and be with us next time on The Game.